universal apparition, and it's real.
Ghosts. How do we imagine them today? Translucent, floating, often barely visible, as if they're made of mist or fog. They drift through walls, defy gravity, and fade in and out of existence. But have you ever wondered why this is the image of a ghost that haunts our modern world? The truth is, this wasn't always the case. In the past, ghosts were described very differently. Before the 19th century, people envisioned ghosts as solid beings, figures that could walk, talk, even fight. So how did we go from corporeal apparitions to the translucent, floating phantoms of today? Welcome to Stranger History, where we dive deep into the unexplained, the bizarre, and the spooky tales from history. Today, we're talking about one of the most iconic representations of the supernatural, translucent, floating ghosts. We'll explore how these modern depictions emerged and what cultural, technological, and scientific shifts contributed to this change. From phantasmagoria shows to 19th century photography, we're unraveling the eerie evolution of ghosts. Let's begin with how ghosts were imagined in early literature and folklore. In ancient Greece, for example, ghosts were depicted as shadowy but still physical figures. In Homer's Odyssey, the ghost of Achilles appears as a pale yet solid version of himself, a spirit you could recognize, talk to, and even touch. In ancient Rome, too, spirits were often depicted as being physically present. In the Middle Ages, ghosts were also thought to be corporeal. They could wear clothes, carry swords, and even return from the dead to resolve earthly matters. They were seen as formidable, human-like figures with unfinished business. Shakespeare's Hamlet gives us one of the most famous depictions of a ghost from this time. Hamlet's father, clad in armor, walks the castle battlements. His appearance is solid, almost as if he never died. But things began to change in the late 18th century with the rise of a phenomenon known as phantasmagoria. This was a type of horror entertainment that used magic lanterns, an early form of a projector, to create illusions of floating ghosts. Developed by Belgian physicist Etienne Gaspard Robert, also known as Robertson, phantasmagoria shows used the interplay of light, shadow, and projections on smoke or screens to give audiences the sensation of seeing ghosts float in the air. Robertson's genius lay in creating an experience where these projected figures would appear, vanish, and move as if they weren't constrained by physical reality. The use of light and shadow tricks was revolutionary. These ghosts were not solid. They were ephemeral, flickering in and out of existence. The audience would see these figures gliding through walls, floating in mid-air, or fading into nothingness. This was a completely new way to experience the supernatural. The mechanics behind phantasmagoria were relatively simple but highly effective. Magic lanterns used concave mirrors and lenses to project images onto surfaces or smoke, creating a spectral effect. The distance between the light source and the screen could be adjusted, making the ghost appear to shrink or grow, vanish, or loom larger than life. For 18th century audiences, this was pure magic. And just like that, the concept of a ghost being translucent, untethered by gravity, was born. While phantasmagoria planted the seed for our modern idea of floating translucent ghosts, it was photography that solidified it, quite literally. In the mid-19th century, photography was becoming increasingly popular, and with it came a strange new phenomenon: spirit photography. Spirit photography is when a ghostly image, often translucent, appears in a photograph alongside the living. At the time, people believed these photographs were genuine proof of the existence of spirits. But how did these ghostly images come about? The answer lies in the science of early photography techniques, specifically double exposure. Double exposure is when two images are layered onto a single photograph. This can happen accidentally, but early photographers quickly realized that it could be used to create eerie effects. In the long exposure process used by 19th century cameras, subjects who moved during a photo would appear faint or blurred. This gave them a ghostly appearance. Later, photographers deliberately employed double exposure techniques to create spirit images. The photographer would take a picture of a scene, then, without winding the film, expose it again with a faint image of a person, giving the illusion that the second person was a ghost hovering near the first. To those unfamiliar with photography's tricks, these images seemed like definitive proof of the afterlife. Spirit photography reinforced the idea that ghosts were ethereal, barely visible, and hovering between the worlds of the living and the dead. The semi-transparent, floating spirit became cemented in the cultural imagination. During the same period, the Victorian fascination with spiritualism played a huge role in shaping how ghosts were perceived. The spiritualist movement, which began in the 1840s, was built on the belief that the dead could communicate with the living, often through mediums during seances. Victorians were obsessed with the afterlife, and seances became popular entertainment as well as a way for people to try to connect with lost loved ones. During seances, mediums frequently described spirits as floating, transparent, and able to move through walls and objects, mirroring the imagery seen in phantasmagoria and spirit photography. This helped cement the concept of ghosts as translucent floating figures in the popular imagination. But why do these translucent images still feel so eerie to us today? Science offers some fascinating insights. When we see something partially transparent, like a figure that isn't fully solid, our brains struggle to make sense of it. This creates a sense of unease because the image doesn't fit into the patterns we're used to processing. Our brains are wired to recognize familiar shapes, particularly human figures, but when a figure is transparent or faint, our brain can't fully understand what it's seeing. It triggers a fear response, likely an evolutionary leftover meant to protect us from potential dangers in the shadows. In the case of spirit photography, the faintness of the figures plays directly into this fear response. The ghostly transparency taps into our primal fears: fear of the unknown, fear of death, fear of something we can't fully perceive or understand. The translucent ghost feels dangerous, mysterious, and just beyond our grasp. In the 20th and 21st centuries, this image of the ghost as a translucent floating figure has only been reinforced by modern media. Films, TV shows, and even video games use advanced CGI and special effects to make ghosts float, vanish, and reappear in ways that enhance their eerie, untouchable presence. The floating, translucent ghost has become the gold standard in visual storytelling because it taps into our deepest fears: that the dead aren't quite gone, and that they can move between the realms of the living and the dead, unbound by physical limitations. So why are ghosts translucent and floating today? It's a mix of cultural evolution, psychological fear, and technological advancements. From the phantasmagoria of the 18th century to the tricks of spirit photography and the visual effects of modern cinema, the floating, translucent ghost has been shaped by centuries of imagination and fear. Thank you for joining us on this eerie journey through the evolution of ghostly imagery. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay up to date with all the strange and mysterious tales we uncover on Stranger History. Until next time, keep an eye out for those translucent visitors. Who knows what might be watching from the shadows?
It's right here, Ray. It's looking at me.
He's an ugly little spud, isn't he?
I think he can hear you, Ray.
Don't move. It won't hurt you.
Ah!